I always knew I wasn't what they wanted. From the moment I could understand words, I understood disappointment. My parents, Robert and Helen, had hoped for a son. Instead, they got me Layla. I wasn't enough, and they didn't hide it. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support truly helps more than you know. 3 years after I was born, my sister Sophie came into the world. Complications during her birth meant my parents couldn't have more children. That's when their dreams shifted, from having a son to counting on Sophie to give them grandsons. It was like I didn't exist anymore. Sophie became the favorite quickly. She knew how to smile at the right moments, say the perfect things, and charm her way into their hearts. I wasn't like that. I was quiet, more thoughtful. I didn't know how to compete, so I stopped trying. Even though I had clothes, food, and a home, I didn't have what mattered most: love. Real love. Emotional connection. I learned how to depend on myself, how to survive without the kind of affection every child deserves. I stopped asking for hugs. I stopped waiting for praise. And I promised myself I'd never rely on anyone again. I had made up my mind. I was going to study business analytics at Riverside University. It wasn't a decision I came to lightly. I had spent nights researching, reading, imagining a future where I could build something of my own, something smart and solid. But when I told my parents, all I got was a nod and a faint, "Oh." No excitement, no pride, just muted disappointment. I knew what they had wanted: something softer, something more traditional, teaching or nursing, something that fit their idea of what a good daughter should be. Then Sophie announced her major, communications. The room lit up. Suddenly there were claps, questions, plans about internships and media job. It was like someone had turned the volume up on her life and left mine on mute. Again, I didn't let it show, but that familiar sting burned deep. I had stopped expecting praise long ago, but it still hurt every time they gave it so easily to her and withheld it from me like I hadn't earned it. At university, though, I felt like I could breathe. The campus was big, full of students from all over, and no one knew me as the older daughter or the quiet one. I could just be Layla. I liked numbers, logic, structure. There was something calming about spreadsheets and projections. Everything made sense. It felt like I was finally in a place that fit who I was. One afternoon, while trying to find a book for my research paper in the university library, I bumped into Daniel. Literally, my books fell, and before I could bend down, he was already helping me pick them up. He was a senior in my program, friendly, warm, but not overbearing. We ended up talking, first about the project, then about our classes, and then somehow about life in general. It started with occasional study sessions, then coffee, then longer walks back to our dorm. He actually listened to me. He asked about my opinions, my ideas. He remembered the little things I said in passing. For the first time in my life, someone made me feel seen. Not tolerated, not compared. Seen. He didn't make me feel like I had to prove myself or shrink myself to fit in. With him, I laughed more. I spoke more. I stopped holding back. There was something different about Daniel. He wasn't like the people I grew up with. He didn't expect me to fit into a box. I still remember the first time he told me he admired my independence. I was surprised. No one had ever used that word about me before. Growing up, it was always distant or too serious. But he saw strength where others saw silence. And I didn't realize how starved I was for that kind of recognition until I got it. The more time we spent together, the more I began to let go of the walls I had built around myself. He didn't try to fix me or change me. He just stayed. And somehow that was enough to make me feel safe. It didn't take long before we were inseparable. I didn't tell my family much about him at first. Part of me wanted to keep this feeling untouched by their opinions. For once, I had something that was mine, just mine. And it felt too precious to throw into their cold indifference. But deep down, I knew that Daniel was different from anyone I had ever known. And I was beginning to believe, maybe for the first time, that I was worthy of something good, something real. After graduation, everything felt like it was finally falling into place. Daniel got a job offer from Summit Strategic Consulting not even a week after finishing his final exam. I still remember the look on his face when he got the call. It was this perfect mix of relief and pride. He deserved it. He had worked so hard, stayed up night after night, and never once complained. Watching him step into that next phase of life, I couldn't have been happier. A few months later, I graduated too. We packed up our things and moved into a small apartment downtown. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a tiny balcony. But to us, it felt like freedom. Our own little space, away from the noise, the pressure, and the people who had always tried to mold us into what they thought we should be. We bought secondhand furniture, cooked late dinners together, and stayed up watching old movies with cheap popcorn. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. When I finally introduced Daniel properly to my parents, something strange happened. They didn't just approve of him, they adored him. almost too quickly. Suddenly, my mother was calling him such a fine young man, and my father laughed louder at his jokes than I'd ever heard before. It was like Daniel had flipped some hidden switch, unlocking a warmth in them I had never been able to reach. They started inviting him over without me. My mom would call and ask, "Is Daniel coming by this weekend?" "Not are you?" I'd hear them asking him about work, his dreams, his goals. My dad even mentioned how proud he was of Daniel's position at Summit. It was hard not to notice the difference. They were treating him like the son they never had, and suddenly, I wasn't even in the room. Meanwhile, Sophie was still living at home. No serious relationship, just casually dating here and there. At first, she seemed happy for me, but over time, the smiles faded. I could feel her watching Daniel a little too closely, and the way her tone shifted when she spoke about him, joking, but with something sharp underneath. She'd roll her eyes and say things like, "Wow, Daniel again," or, "Guess Mom finally got the golden child, huh?" One evening, after dinner with my family, Sophie cornered me in the hallway. "You always get what you don't even try for," she said quietly, with a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't answer. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't make it worse. Despite all that, Daniel and I kept building our life. Quietly, honestly. We didn't want anything fancy or loud. So, when he proposed, simple and sincere, just the two of us, I said yes without hesitation. We decided to have a small wedding. Just a few close friends, a modest venue, nothing extravagant. When we told my parents the plan, they weren't thrilled. My mom insisted we could afford more if we just asked. My dad offered to pull strings at some country club he'd mentioned before, but we politely said no. We didn't want a show. We wanted something that felt like us, real, peaceful, and full of meaning. On our wedding day, I looked around at the small group gathered, people who loved us for who we really were, and I knew we had made the right choice. No grand hall, no spotlight, no false smiles. Just Daniel and me, choosing each other without the noise. It wasn't the kind of celebration my parents dreamed of, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't care what they wanted, because I was finally starting to know what I wanted. And this was it. It didn't take long after the wedding for the questions to begin. At first, they were subtle. Little hints dropped during dinners or casual phone calls. My mother would say things like, "Oh, I saw the cutest baby shoes at the store today," or, "You're not getting any younger." My father would chime in with comments about carrying on the family name, always wrapped in a forced chuckle, like it was just a joke. But the message was clear. Now that we were married, they expected a baby, and they expected it soon. Daniel and I had talked about it. We both wanted a family someday, but we also knew what kind of life we wanted to give our future child. We weren't ready yet. We wanted to save up, buy a house, build a secure foundation, not bring a baby into a life that still felt like it was in progress. When I gently explained this to my parents, their faces fell. They didn't argue right away, but that silence said everything. It was the same old look of disappointment I had seen so many times before. Then Sophie dropped her news. It was one of those evenings where the family was gathered for dinner, everyone pretending to enjoy each other's company. In the middle of passing the salad, Sophie casually announced she was pregnant. Just like that. No build-up, no emotion, just, "I'm going to have a baby." The room froze for a second, then exploded in excitement. My mother nearly dropped her glass. My father beamed like someone had just handed him a crown. Sophie explained the father was a guy named Liam, someone she had only been seeing for a short while. Apparently, he had taken off the moment he heard the word pregnant, but none of that mattered to Helen and Robert. They didn't ask about the relationship or what Sophie planned to do on her own. They were too busy dreaming about the baby. Within weeks, the house was transformed. The guest room turned into a nursery with pastel walls and brand new furniture. Baby clothes appeared in drawers. My mom started knitting again, tiny hats, blankets, booties. My dad, who never cared about shopping, suddenly became an expert on strollers. It was like the baby had already arrived. I tried to be supportive. I really did. But every visit became harder. The way they talked about the baby like she was royalty, the way they hovered over Sophie like she was made of glass, it was overwhelming. And no matter how many times I reminded them that Daniel and I weren't rushing into parenthood, they wouldn't let it go. They brought it up constantly. "Look how good Daniel is with the baby," my mom would say when he held one of Sophie's ultrasound photos. "He'll be such a natural father." Or my dad would look at me with a grin and say, "What are you two waiting for, huh? Your little sister's already ahead of you." The worst part, they weren't even subtle about comparing us. Sophie, the glowing mother-to-be, praised for every breath she took. And me, the married daughter who still hadn't given them anything. It didn't matter that I was working hard, saving, planning. None of that counted in their eyes. Only babies did. And as Sophie's belly grew, so did the distance between me and my family. I could feel it. Every smile that didn't reach my eyes, every question I couldn't answer without being judged. The pressure wasn't just about having a baby, it was about proving I was enough. And no matter what I did, It seemed like that answer was already written. We had finally settled into the house. It wasn't huge or fancy, but it was ours, quiet, warm, and full of potential. Daniel and I had worked hard to reach that point. Long nights, tight budgets, sacrifices most people never see. And once we had the keys, we looked at each other and knew we were ready to start trying for a baby. Not because anyone expected it, not because of the pressure, but because we truly wanted to grow our little world. At first, everything felt full of hope. We marked calendars, learned more than we ever thought we would about ovulation cycles and timing. It became part of our routine, both serious and a little silly, filled with nervous laughter and shared dreams about baby names, nursery colors, and who the child might take after. We were hopeful. We believed it would happen. But months went by. Then a year. And with every passing cycle, hope started to feel more like a silent ache. It wasn't just the physical part of it. It was the waiting, the guessing, the emotional roller coaster. I tried to stay calm, to tell myself that it just took time. But there were days where the sadness was hard to carry. Especially when other people, without even meaning to, reminded me of what I couldn't yet have. Around that time, I started noticing something else. A shift. Daniel was still kind, still loving, but there was a distance growing between us. We weren't talking about the future as much. He stayed longer during visits to my parents' house, especially with Olivia around. He'd hold her, play with her, laugh in ways I hadn't seen in a while. And I'd watch from a distance, unsure whether I was overthinking or finally seeing what I had tried not to. I knew my mother was watching too. Every time I came over, her comments got sharper. "Still no news?" she'd ask, eyebrows raised, voice sweet but heavy with judgment. I brushed it off for months. But the weight of not knowing why it wasn't happening started to press down harder. I told Daniel I wanted to see a doctor. He agreed, though his eyes avoided mine when he said it. The clinic was cold, clean, and filled with soft music meant to comfort. But no music could soften what came next. After several tests and long, quiet moments in the doctor's office, I heard the word I had been dreading, infertility. I was told it might still be possible, but chances were low. The hope I had clung to began to crack. Telling Daniel was hard. But telling my family? That was a different pain entirely. We were at the dinner table. I had barely gotten the words out when the silence broke like glass. My mother's face twisted, not in sympathy but in disgust. My father looked away. Sophie didn't even pretend to hide the smirk. And Daniel said nothing. I went home that night, replaying every second in my head. What hurt the most wasn't the diagnosis. It was how quickly love turned to shame, how easily they threw me into a category I hadn't chosen. Days passed. Daniel kept going to see them. He'd come back smiling after spending time with Olivia, like everything was normal. But for me, nothing was. I started to realize that the silence between us wasn't temporary, it was growing roots. And every time he left to be with them, I felt more alone in the very house we had built together. Some betrayals don't come with loud arguments or broken glass. They come quietly, in whispers, in moments you almost scroll past. That's how it started for me. A normal evening, just me and my phone, trying to distract myself from the weight I'd been carrying for months. Then I saw it. A photo. Smiling faces I knew too well. Daniel, Sophie, and Olivia, together. The caption read "Family Time," followed by a heart emoji. At first, I didn't react. I stared at it, blinking, unsure if I was misunderstanding something. But the longer I looked, the clearer it became. Their closeness, the comfort in their body language, the kind of happiness in Daniel's eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Not even with me. Something twisted in my stomach. It wasn't just a casual post. It was a message, intentional or not, and I couldn't ignore it. I grabbed my keys and drove. My mind was racing but blank all at once. I wasn't sure what I'd say. I just knew I needed to see it for myself. To hear something, anything, that would explain why that photo made me feel like a stranger looking in from the cold. When I arrived at the house, I didn't walk in right away. I sat in the driveway, engine off, trying to calm the storm in my chest. Voices drifted from the open window. I didn't mean to listen, but I did. I wish I hadn't. There was my mother's voice, soft, coaxing. She told Daniel he deserved happiness. Said some women are meant to be mothers, and some just aren't. That I would understand eventually. My father chimed in, calling Daniel a good man, especially with how well he handled Olivia. Then came the words I'll never forget. My mother suggesting he should leave me. That I was barren, and that Sophie could give him the family he deserved. I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened, and for a moment, I just sat there frozen. I had been so afraid of being left behind, of being forgotten, and here they were, already moving on without me. I walked inside without knocking. Their laughter stopped instantly when they saw me. The room was full of stunned silence. Sophie was holding Olivia. Daniel looked like a child caught red-handed. My parents didn't even try to hide their discomfort. I looked at Daniel and asked the question I already knew the answer to. He didn't deny it. Said it started with spending more time around Sophie, bonding over Olivia, that it just happened. He told me he still cared about me, but he wanted children. Wanted a future I couldn't give him. Sophie didn't even flinch. She just looked at me and said, "Maybe it's time you let go." That was it. No apology. No guilt. Just smug triumph. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, not there. I simply turned around and left. When I got home, I packed in silence. Every picture, every trace of the life we shared went into boxes. I left Daniel a note on the kitchen counter. 3 words: file for divorce. There was no fight. No drawn-out process. It ended quickly, almost too easily, like everything we had built was just paper ready to be torn. And as I walked away, I felt the weight lift, not because I wasn't hurting, but because I finally chose myself. After all the silence, all the pressure, and all the betrayal, I had nothing left to prove to anyone. The silence after everything ended was loud. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a blanket you didn't ask for. I was alone, not just without a husband, but without a family. The people who were supposed to care the most had hurt me in ways I never thought they could. I packed up what was left of my life and moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to answer to anyone. The days that followed were hard. I buried myself in work. Early mornings, late nights. I took every project I could. The more I filled my schedule, the less I had to feel. My apartment was quiet, and my phone stopped lighting up with messages. I didn't reach out, and no one came looking. But in that stillness, something began to shift. I had space to breathe, to think, to feel the weight of what I had survived, and to slowly start letting it go. I still had moments when the past would sneak up on me. A familiar song, a scent, a dream I didn't ask for. Sometimes I'd open old photos just to remind myself that I hadn't made it up, that it all really happened. That once there was love, or something that looked like it. But those photos began to feel like someone else's life. Someone I used to be. It was during one of those quiet weeks that something unexpected happened. I was in a grocery store, standing in front of a shelf of canned beans, debating between 2 brands that probably tasted the same. A man beside me reached for the same can, our hands bumped, and we both laughed. Nothing special, nothing dramatic, but something about his smile stayed with me. That was Marcus. We talked, first in line at the checkout, then over coffee at the small cafe next door. He was kind, soft-spoken, and funny in a calm, steady way. Nothing like the people I had known before. There was no rush, no charm worn like a mask. Just honesty. As we got to know each other, I didn't hold back. I didn't want to start something based on half-truth. I told him about the pain, the betrayal, the infertility. I waited for the look I'd seen before, the one that said I wasn't enough, wasn't woman enough, wasn't whole. But it never came. Marcus just nodded and said, "Thank you for trusting me," like it was the most natural thing in the world. He told me he never measured love by bloodline, that building a life together didn't have to mean children, and if we ever did want them, we'd figure it out, whether through adoption, surrogacy, or simply pouring our love into each other. For the first time, I didn't feel broken when I talked about my past. I felt seen. We didn't plan some grand wedding. There was no dress shopping, no invitations, no drama. Just 2 people at a courthouse, signing papers and holding hands. Simple, quiet, ours. And in that moment, I realized something. Love isn't supposed to make you feel like you have to earn your place. It's supposed to feel like home. Marcus never asked me to prove my worth. He never compared me to anyone. With him, I didn't feel like a failure or a placeholder or someone waiting to be chosen. I was the choice. And slowly, I began to believe that I was never the problem. I had just been giving my heart to the wrong people. A year into our marriage, life had finally found its rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. Marcus and I had settled into something steady, something safe. We worked, cooked meals together, spent quiet weekends reading or walking through the park. For the first time in years, my heart wasn't heavy with what I lacked. I had stopped measuring my life against other people's timeline. I had love. I had freedom. I had peace. Then came the nausea. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe a stomach bug, maybe stress, maybe bad takeout. But days passed, and it didn't go away. I was tired all the time, dizzy in the mornings, and couldn't stand the smell of coffee anymore. That last part hit me hardest. I loved coffee. Marcus noticed something was off, asked if I was okay. I nodded, smiled, told him it was probably nothing. But deep down, a thought was forming, a wild, impossible thought I barely allowed myself to consider. I tried to ignore it, tried to logic my way out of it, but that nagging feeling wouldn't leave. So one quiet afternoon, I went to the doctor. Alone. I sat in the clinic, heart racing, surrounded by cheerful posters of babies and smiling parents. It felt like a cruel place to be for someone like me. I still remembered the last time I sat in a doctor's office. hearing the words that shattered me, infertility. I expected the same kind of conversation again, polite sympathy, careful phrasing. But this time was different. The doctor walked in with a puzzled smile. "Layla," she said, "you're pregnant." I stared at her, waiting for the joke. I actually laughed, nervously, unsure if I had misheard. She confirmed it again. A heartbeat. A baby. Inside me. A rare, miraculous chance. I left the clinic in a daze, the paper in my hand trembling. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or fall to my knees. After everything I had been told, after being labeled and dismissed, this was happening. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not even Marcus. Not until I could fully process it myself. I sat with the news like it was a secret too fragile to speak out loud. And when I finally told him, he wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Months passed, and the fear slowly turned into wonder. I felt every flutter, every kick, every change in my body like a quiet victory. I still didn't reach out to my family. They hadn't earned the right to share in something this precious. This joy was mine. Ours. When our son Benjamin was born, I held him against my chest and felt a love I didn't know existed. Not a love that demanded or compared or criticized, but a love that simply was pure, whole, unshaken. I looked into his tiny eyes and knew I had never been empty. I had never been broken. I had simply been waiting for the right time, the right heart, the right kind of love to bring this life into the world. And now he was here. It was one of those rare nights where everything felt right. Marcus had just received a well-deserved promotion, and we decided to celebrate. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet dinner at a cozy restaurant with dim lighting, soft music, and the kind of calm that feels earned. We laughed, toasted with sparkling cider, and talked about the future. Life felt gentle again, but life has a strange way of throwing shadows across your light. I excused myself to the restroom, passing by the more private section of the restaurant. That's when I saw her, Sophie, but not alone. She was tucked into a corner booth, her hand intertwined with someone who wasn't Daniel. Their heads leaned close. He kissed her like no one else existed, and from the way she smiled, she didn't seem to care who might see. I froze, watching for a moment too long. This wasn't just an innocent meeting. It was passionate, intimate, shameless. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't react, not outward. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took a few photos quietly. Clear ones. Undeniable. I returned to my table and didn't say a word. Not yet. I didn't need to. I had learned that silence could be powerful when used at the right time. A few weeks passed. I didn't tell anyone about what I saw. I went on with life, enjoying my time with Marcus and Benjamin. Then, one afternoon, we stopped by a supermarket to pick up a few things. As we stepped into the parking lot with our bags, I saw them: Helen, Robert, Sophie, and Daniel. They were standing by their car mid-conversation. At first, they saw me and turned away, like I was invisible. The same old routine. But then they saw Benjamin, and everything changed. Robert's eyes widened. Helen whispered something to Sophie. Daniel stared. They walked over slowly, curious, puzzled, maybe even a little nervous. "Who's the baby?" Helen asked, voice tight. I looked straight at her. "My son," I said calmly. Sophie scoffed, folding her arms. "Adopted?" "No," I replied. "I gave birth to him." The silence that followed was delicious. Robert stepped forward, reaching out. "He looks like you, may I?" "No," I said firmly, shifting Benjamin away from his hand. "You don't get to touch him. Not after what you said. Not after what you did." Helen's smile faltered. "Layla, that was a long time ago. Things change. We're family." I shook my head. "You made it clear I wasn't part of your family the moment you chose Sophie's lies over my truth." Sophie, still smug, rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You're acting like you're special now just because you popped out a baby. I still won. I gave Daniel the family he wanted. I'm the reason he left you." I almost laughed. I pulled out my phone, opened the gallery, and showed them the photos, the ones from the restaurant. Her hands on that stranger, her lips on his. Their perfect little secret. Sophie's face drained of color. Daniel stared in disbelief. "What is this?" he asked, voice shaking. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Helen gasped. Robert looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Sophie opened her mouth to speak, but had no words. And Daniel, he just stood there, staring at the woman he left me for, realizing that he didn't just betray the wrong person. He built his future on a lie. We turned around and walked away, leaving them behind with their chaos. That day in the parking lot wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. They finally saw me, not as someone to overlook, not as the one who lost, but as the one who rose. Quietly, powerfully, completely. Sometimes life has a strange way of revealing the truth, slowly, piece by piece, until everything finally makes sense. The people who once acted so sure of themselves, who stood tall on their pride, eventually run out of places to hide. That's what happened with Daniel and Sophie. I didn't go looking for updates. I had no interest in their lives. But in a small town, stories travel fast, and some truths find you whether you want them or not. It started with whispers. Daniel had quietly gotten tested, not for Sophie's sake, but for his own clarity. He needed answers after seeing those photos. And the result? The irony was brutal. He had been infertile all along. The same man who stood in silence when I was blamed for our childless marriage was the reason it never happened in the first place. The fallout was immediate. The moment he saw the truth on paper, he walked out. He didn't just leave Sophie, he cut ties with everything. No more support for Olivia. No acknowledgement of Lily. It was as if he realized the weight of everything he had built was standing on a lie, and he had no courage to face it. He disappeared from their lives, leaving Sophie to clean up the mess they once proudly paraded. Sophie, now alone and with 2 daughters she couldn't handle, had no choice but to return to the one place that had always embraced her, Helen and Robert's home. The same home that once celebrated her as the real woman was now her hiding place. The sparkle in her eyes had faded, and from what I heard, reality had hit her harder than she ever expected. Then came the calls. My parents, after everything they had said and done, tried to reach out. At first, it was about Benjamin. He deserves to know his grandparents. Then it became about forgiveness. Regret. Empty apologies hidden beneath guilt. But I didn't answer. When the letters came, I read the first one. My mother had written about missing her grandson, how time had changed her, how they just wanted a chance to make things right. I placed the letter in a drawer and never responded. Not out of hate, but out of understanding. Some things can't be undone with words. I looked at Benjamin playing on the floor, laughter echoing through our home. I watched Marcus walk in after work, tired but smiling, kissing my forehead and asking about dinner. And I knew in my heart, I already had everything I needed. They weren't my family anymore. Not because I shut them out, but because they made their choice a long time ago. And now, so had I. Marcus and Benjamin were mine, not by blood or obligation, but by love, loyalty, and truth. We had built something strong, something real. Not perfect, but peaceful. And in that peace, I finally found what I had spent my whole life searching for: home. They say family is everything, but what if your own family breaks you? Do you think I was right to walk away for good? Or should I have let them back in for Benjamin's sake? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear from you. And hey, never miss a new one. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories like this.